The galaxy was in chaos. A once peaceful region, known for its diversity and harmony, was now crumbling under the weight of an unimaginable threat. Alien civilizations that had coexisted for eons were now under siege. Their cities burned, their fleets shattered, and their people desperate for any hope of survival. The unstoppable force that attacked them was unlike anything they had ever seen. The aliens were afraid. No, terrified. For the first time in their history, they found themselves facing an enemy they could not defeat. Their weapons were useless. Their strongest warriors had fallen in battle. They had tried everything, but nothing worked. The unknown invaders had a power that overpowered even the most advanced technologies the galaxy had to offer. From one world to another, the message spread. We need help. Please, someone, anyone, save us. It was not just a plea. It was a cry for survival. These alien civilizations, once proud and powerful, were now on their knees. One planet after another sent out distress signals, hoping someone, anyone, could hear their calls. Across the stars, the frequency of their transmissions echoed. The cry of desperation reverberated through the galaxy, but there was no one to respond. Yet, in the farthest reaches of the galaxy, something stirred. The aliens had heard rumors, whispers about a race so fierce, so powerful, that even the most fearsome enemies feared them. Stories had spread from one system to another about the Deathworlders, the humans. Legends spoke of their strength, their resilience, and their ability to survive the harshest environments. Some even believed they were immortal. However, no one had ever dared to call them for help. The Deathworlders were a mysterious and distant race, feared by friend and foe alike. But now, with the galaxy on the brink of destruction, there seemed to be no other choice. The signal went out, a final, desperate call, transmitted across light years of empty space, reaching into the unknown. The aliens' leaders gathered in secret, their hopes flickering as they prepared to send their most urgent message yet. We are dying. We cannot stand against this force. We need the Deathworlders. Please, save us. We have no other option. The message was sent. Silence followed. For what felt like an eternity, nothing happened. The aliens held their breath, praying that somewhere, someone would answer. Was it too late? Had the galaxy fallen beyond the point of no return? The sound of destruction echoed across their worlds, and each passing moment felt like the last breath of the dying civilizations. But then, something changed. A strange signal appeared on the radar screens of the alien command centers. It was faint at first, like a whisper in the void, but as it grew stronger, it became clear. There was a ship out there, and it was headed straight for them. The aliens' hearts raced as they tried to decipher the strange transmission. It wasn't like anything they had encountered before. The signal was not a typical alien frequency. It was chaotic and powerful, filled with the unmistakable feeling of raw strength. This was not a friendly race offering aid. This was something far more dangerous, yet strangely comforting, something that made the hairs on the back of their necks stand up. As the strange signal grew clearer, it became undeniable. The Deathworlders had heard their cry. But what would they do next? The alien leaders could hardly believe their eyes as a massive fleet of unknown ships began to materialize before them. The ships were unlike anything they had ever seen, huge, imposing, and radiating power. The aliens had heard of the Deathworlders' reputation, but seeing them with their own eyes was a different experience altogether. This was not just a military force. This was an unstoppable storm, a force of nature. The Deathworlders had come, and their arrival was nothing short of terrifying. For the first time in what felt like forever, the alien leaders allowed themselves to hope. Could these strange beings save them from certain annihilation? Or would they, too, fall under the weight of the overwhelming enemy? The fear in the alien leaders' hearts began to shift toward awe as the fleet grew closer. The Deathworlders didn't come in peace. They came with a message. We are here to destroy your enemies. Stand aside, or stand with us. The aliens were stunned. They had heard of the human Deathworlders, mighty and merciless, but they never truly understood what that meant. Until now. And so, as the massive Deathworlder fleet came into full view, the galaxy held its breath. The alien civilizations had one final choice. Would they risk everything and stand alongside the most feared warriors in the galaxy? Or would they cower in fear, letting their civilization slip into oblivion? As the stars above grew dark, one thing became clear: the Deathworlders had come, and nothing would be the same again. The tension was palpable across the alien worlds. With every passing moment, the fleet of Deathworlders drew closer. No one knew exactly what to expect, but one thing was certain: these humans were not like any other race. The message they sent was not one of diplomacy or cooperation. It was a declaration of power, something the galaxy hadn't seen in centuries. The alien leaders, who had been prepared to fight to the bitter end, stood in awe as they observed the arrival of the Deathworlder fleet. The sight was beyond anything they could have imagined. The ships were enormous, each one the size of a moon, dark and imposing, bristling with weapons unlike any the aliens had ever seen. The Deathworlders were coming, and they were not coming for peace. The alien command centers buzzed with activity, their officers scrambling to make sense of the rapidly approaching ships. Communications officers tried frantically to hail the Deathworlder fleet, but the silence on the other end was deafening. The ships didn't respond to any attempt at contact. They simply advanced, their course set with unshakable precision. "What is this?" one of the alien commanders asked, his voice trembling. He had seen many fleets in his lifetime, but nothing like this. The Deathworlder's ships were massive, their shapes sleek and intimidating, casting shadows across the stars. Each ship was a weapon. Nothing like it had ever been seen in the galaxy. As the fleet entered the system, the massive ships appeared to be surrounded by a strange aura, an unnatural energy that distorted space around them. For a moment, it seemed as if time itself bent under the weight of their presence. Every alien watching knew, in that instant, that this was no ordinary military force. This was something far more dangerous. In the command center of the largest surviving alien city, the leaders exchanged nervous glances. They had sent out the call for help. But now that the Deathworlders had arrived, it was clear that they were not just offering assistance. They were here for one purpose only: to win, no matter the cost. "Prepare the defenses," one leader barked. "We must be ready for whatever comes next." But deep down, they all knew nothing could prepare them for what was about to happen. As the first of the Deathworlder ships passed through the outer edge of the system, the sheer force of their power sent ripples through the surrounding space. The alien fleet, which had once seemed so imposing, now looked like ants before a great flood. The Deathworlder's ships moved with terrifying speed and precision. They made no attempt to hide their presence. Instead, they boldly declared it. The first communication from the Deathworlder fleet crackled through the command center speakers, the voice cold and distant. "This is your last warning," the voice said, with an intensity that sent shivers down the spines of the alien leaders. "You have two choices: surrender or face destruction." The message was chilling in its simplicity. It wasn't an offer of negotiation. There would be no talking, no bargaining. The Deathworlders would either crush their enemies or burn them to the ground. The leaders of the alien worlds had been in power for centuries. They had seen countless battles, survived attacks from invaders, and dealt with threats far greater than themselves. Yet, here they were, standing before a force that made all their previous enemies seem insignificant. The Deathworlders were not here to talk. They were here to end the war, and they would do whatever it took to accomplish that. The unknown enemies who had attacked the galaxy's weakest civilizations had no idea what they were about to face. The alien leaders watched in horror as the first waves of Deathworlder ships positioned themselves in the system, their weapons charging with deadly energy. Their movements were deliberate, unyielding. With each ship that joined the fleet, the sense of foreboding grew stronger. "Do you think they will help us?" one of the alien leaders whispered. Another leader shook his head. I don't know. But one thing is certain. They have the power to stop this threat. And so, with every passing minute, the Deathworlder fleet surrounded the galaxy's weakest and most vulnerable alien worlds. The aliens had sent their desperate plea, and now the humans had come. But as they watched the Deathworlder ships power up their weapons and form an impenetrable barrier, they realized this was not a rescue mission. This was a reckoning. The Deathworlders had come to destroy the enemy, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The galaxy held its breath. The silence was deafening as the Deathworlder fleet closed in, drawing nearer to the alien worlds in distress. Each passing second felt like an eternity, and the once bold alien leaders were now gripped by a mix of fear and anticipation. The weapon systems of the Deathworlder ships were powered up and ready, but there was still no sign of the final move. On the bridge of the lead Deathworlder ship, Commander Drake stared at the monitor, his expression cold, but focused. He had led countless campaigns on Earth, facing down enemies that had thought themselves untouchable. But this was different. These aliens, though powerful, were out of their depth. This wasn't a negotiation. This was a war, and the Deathworlders were here to win. Commander Drake's voice echoed through the ship's communication system, sharp and unwavering. Initiate attack formation. We will not wait any longer. This ends now. Without a word, the massive fleet of Deathworlder ships moved in perfect unison. They had trained for years, prepared for a conflict like this. Their entire fleet knew exactly what they were about to do, and there was no hesitation. They had come to protect the galaxy's weakest, but they had also come to show the entire universe the true might of humanity. As the first wave of ships opened fire, the universe seemed to tremble. The alien ships, though impressive in their own right, were simply no match for the overwhelming force of the Deathworlders. The enemy ships, which had previously been viewed as the pinnacle of power, began to buckle under the force of the first barrage of weapons. Energy blasts tore through the cold expanse of space, leaving trails of brilliant light that illuminated the dark void. The Deathworlders were relentless, their weapons far superior to anything the alien forces had ever seen. Massive explosions erupted in the distance as alien ships disintegrated, their metal hulls torn apart by the sheer power of the Deathworlders' attack. The alien commanders watched in disbelief. They had hoped the Deathworlders would offer a solution, a way to fight back, but instead, they had brought their own war to the doorstep of the galaxy's enemies. They were not here to negotiate peace. They were here to annihilate anyone who threatened the weak. "We're losing," one of the alien commanders shouted into his communicator. "Fall back. Retreat now." But it was too late. The Deathworlder ships were everywhere, surrounding them, cutting off every avenue of escape. No matter where the alien ships tried to flee, the Deathworlders were already there, cutting them off with devastating efficiency. The battle raged on, but it was clear who was in control. The Deathworlders had struck with the precision of a well-trained force, and they had taken the upper hand before the aliens could even react. One by one, the alien ships fell, torn apart by energy blasts and the unrelenting power of the Deathworlders. In the command center of the lead Deathworlder ship, Commander Drake watched the destruction unfold on his monitors. His voice was as calm as ever, though there was a hint of satisfaction in his tone. "This is for the weak. This is for the ones who cannot fight back. And this is for the galaxy. No one gets to push them around anymore." It was a message to the universe, a message that humanity, the so-called Deathworlders, were not to be trifled with. They would stand against any enemy, no matter how powerful, and they would do whatever it took to protect the helpless. As the battle continued, the alien forces tried desperately to regroup, but it was clear that their fate had been sealed. The Deathworlders were not simply saving the galaxy's weakest. They were taking a stand, showing the entire universe that no one could push the defenseless to the brink without facing the consequences. The destruction of the enemy fleet continued, But for the first time in what felt like ages, the weakest races of the galaxy felt a sense of hope. The humans had come. The Deathworlders had answered their cry for help, and they had not come to negotiate. They had come to end the tyranny. The Deathworlder fleet continued its ruthless assault on the remaining alien forces, but the situation was not as straightforward as it seemed. Commander Drake stood on the bridge of his flagship, his eyes scanning the holographic displays with a watchful, calculating gaze. The battles they had fought in the past had been brutal, but something felt different this time. The aliens, though vastly outmatched in terms of sheer firepower, had not completely folded. They were adapting quickly, retreating in disarray, but regrouping. It seemed as though they were preparing to launch their final stand. It was a desperate maneuver, but one that had to be respected. They were trying to survive, something the Deathworlders understood all too well. Commander Drake's hand hovered over the ship's control panel, his mind running through all possible scenarios. Was this just another desperate attempt, or was there something more to this sudden shift? He didn't get long to contemplate. Suddenly, an alarm blared throughout the ship, signaling an incoming transmission. A calm voice crackled over the speakers, breaking through the chaos of battle. "Commander Drake," the voice said, cool and detached, though there was an underlying desperation that couldn't be masked. "This is High Commander Threx of the United Coalition. We are surrendering. Please, spare our people." Commander Drake raised an eyebrow at the unexpected message. The arrogance and pride of these alien leaders had been undeniable just hours before. But now, in the face of overwhelming force, they were calling for mercy. It was a dramatic shift, one that spoke volumes about the power of the Deathworlders' reputation. Drake didn't respond immediately. Instead, he motioned for his officers to monitor the alien fleets, noting that their ships were no longer advancing, no longer engaging in the offensive. They were retreating, forming a defensive line. "They know it's over," one of his lieutenants muttered under his breath. "But will they truly surrender, or is this just another tactic?" It was a valid concern. After all, the Deathworlders had seen their fair share of enemies who begged for mercy before pulling off a last-minute trick to try and escape. But this felt different. The desperation in Threx's voice couldn't be faked. Commander Drake's eyes narrowed as he gazed at the holographic map, which showed the scattered alien fleets now limping back toward their home planet. He had given them no quarter, yet somehow, the words of the High Commander had shaken him. Was this what victory truly felt like? He gave a short nod, signaling to his crew to initiate a pause in the offensive. "I'll hear them out." As the transmission resumed, High Commander Threx's face appeared on the screen, looking defeated yet composed. "We have failed," Threx said, his voice thick with regret. "We thought we could stand against your kind, but we were wrong. Our fleets are shattered, and we have no choice but to surrender. The lives of our people are in your hands now. Please, show mercy." There was a long pause, a tense silence that stretched between them. Commander Drake's face remained unreadable, but his mind raced. Mercy. What was mercy when the enemy had terrorized others for so long? The Deathworlders had a long history of survival against unimaginable odds. They had learned the hard way how to fight back against those who would destroy them. But there was something about this plea that was different. These aliens had done what many others hadn't. They had acknowledged their defeat. They had acknowledged their weakness. It was a humbling moment. But could the Deathworlders really show mercy to those who had caused so much pain? Would they let their guard down, even for just a moment? Commander Drake weighed the decision carefully. "We won't destroy you," Drake said finally, his voice cutting through the silence with authority. "But remember this, you will answer for the suffering you've caused. Your people will not be wiped out, but your actions will not go unpunished. The galaxy will know what happens when you challenge the Deathworlders." The alien High Commander nodded in understanding, grateful yet fearful of the implications. "Understood. Commander Drake, we will comply. We will work to rebuild and make amends. But we know the price we must pay for our crimes." Drake's expression softened slightly, though there was no mistaking the severity of his words. The galaxy's weak will not be abandoned again. Not while we're here. With that, the transmission ended, and the fleet continued to advance on the alien world. But now, something had shifted in the balance of the battle. The aliens, once so bold, had been forced to surrender. And the Deathworlders, humans, had proven that their resolve could not be broken. The fleets of the galaxy, once in peril, now had a new protector. But the cost of this victory was still unknown. As the Deathworlder fleet hovered in the silent expanse of space above the alien planet, the weight of Commander Drake's decision hung heavily over him. The alien ships, battered and broken, now drifted aimlessly, their once proud forms now reduced to a fraction of their former glory. The forces they had sent to battle had all but collapsed. It was a hollow victory, one that felt different from the previous battles the Deathworlders had fought. Commander Drake stood at the helm of his ship, staring out at the defeated fleet. His decision to show mercy had been a calculated one, but the consequences were still unclear. Was it the right choice? Could they trust these aliens to rebuild, or had they simply delayed the inevitable? He turned to his officers, who were still processing the turn of events. The tactical officer was reviewing the data from the alien fleet's movements, while the communications officer prepared to relay the message to the rest of the galaxy. But it wasn't just the outcome of the battle that had Commander Drake uneasy. It was what lay ahead. The Deathworlders were victorious, yes, but now there was the delicate task of maintaining peace and ensuring these aliens didn't rise again to challenge them. "Status report," Drake ordered. The tactical officer looked up from the display and gave a grim nod. "The enemy ships are no longer a threat. Their remaining forces are retreating to their homeworld, and we have successfully established a no-fly zone around their planet. There's no way they'll be able to mount another defense anytime soon." Drake nodded. "Good. And the message has been sent to the galaxy." "Yes, Commander. The galaxy now knows who stands above them. We've sent a warning. Don't cross the Deathworlders. The aliens understand the cost of their actions, and the galaxy will remember this." Drake paced slowly, his mind deep in thought. We've given them a chance to rebuild. But what will they do with it? His question hung in the air. The idea of mercy was foreign to many Deathworlders. To give a defeated enemy a chance to rise again was dangerous. Yet Drake could not ignore the fact that the galaxy, in its vast complexity, needed balance. Maybe the time had come for the Deathworlders to not just conquer, but to show that they were more than just fighters. They could be protectors too. But the potential threat of future attacks was something that could never be ignored. The war had cost countless lives, both alien and human. It was a burden that would not be easily forgotten. Back on the alien homeworld, High Commander Threx watched the Deathworlder fleet move away, leaving his planet behind. The destruction had been unimaginable, and yet the mercy shown was just as shocking. They had spared them. The Deathworlders had shown compassion. But for what purpose? Threx was not naive. He knew this mercy came with a price. His people would have to answer for their actions. There would be no easy way to rebuild the shattered coalition, and even if they survived, they would never forget what had transpired. But he had no choice. His people were alive, and that was something they would not take for granted. "Now, we rebuild," Threx whispered to himself. But the words lacked confidence. He knew this was just the beginning. The Deathworlders had given them a chance, but it was uncertain whether the galaxy's weakest aliens could ever recover from such a massive defeat. Commander Drake, back aboard his ship, didn't feel the victory he had once expected. In his heart, he knew that showing mercy to a defeated enemy wasn't a simple act of goodwill. It had consequences, ripples that would be felt across the galaxy. The Deathworlders had risen to power not only through strength, but through a strict code. They survived through their ability to outblast, to fight, and to conquer. Now they had to prove that they were capable of something else, of holding the galaxy together. The galaxy, a vast expanse filled with billions of lives, was now watching the aftermath of the Deathworlders' mercy. Commander Drake's decision to allow the alien fleet to retreat and rebuild had sent ripples across the cosmos. Everyone had heard the rumors. Some believed the Deathworlders had made a mistake. Others hailed it as a move of unprecedented foresight. Commander Drake stood at the observation window, looking out at the stars. The universe was calm now, but he knew that peace could be fleeting. The alien fleets may have been temporarily defeated, but their desire for revenge could still be simmering beneath the surface. The choice to show mercy was not just an act of compassion, it was a gamble. "Commander, there's something you need to see," the communications officer said, her voice breaking Drake's thoughts. She gestured to the large holoscreen beside her. Drake stepped forward, watching as the officer pulled up a new transmission. It was a message from the aliens, the very ones the Deathworlders had spared. The alien ambassador appeared on the screen, their once proud form now showing signs of wear. Their eyes, full of uncertainty, met the Deathworlder commander's gaze. "We, the surviving fleet, thank you for your mercy," the ambassador said, their voice both hesitant and sincere. "You could have destroyed us, wiped us out without a second thought, but you spared us. And for that, we are grateful." Drake nodded but said nothing. He had expected gratitude, but something in the ambassador's tone gave him pause. There was more to this message than just thanks. The ambassador continued, "We understand that the galaxy may view this as a sign of weakness, but we assure you, this is not the case. We were wrong to challenge the might of the Deathworlders, and we will rebuild, not to seek revenge, but to seek strength, to ensure that we can never be vulnerable again." Drake raised an eyebrow. This was unexpected. The aliens were admitting their defeat, but there was a hint of something more in their words, a determination to grow stronger and perhaps to prepare for another day. The ambassador's eyes hardened. "We vow that we will not forget the mercy you've shown us, but we also vow that we will be stronger for it. And one day, perhaps, we will stand side by side, not as enemies, but as allies." Drake's mind raced. An alliance with these aliens. Was this possible, or was it just a thinly veiled threat disguised as gratitude? He looked back at his officers. "Prepare to monitor their movements closely. Keep all channels open. I don't trust this yet." The communications officer nodded, setting the plan into motion. The tension in the room was palpable. No one spoke. Everyone knew what was at stake. Meanwhile, on the homeworld of the defeated aliens, High Commander Threx paced in the dim light of his war room. His mind was a storm of thoughts. The Deathworlders' mercy had caught them by surprise. They had expected total destruction, but instead they had been spared. It was both a blessing and a curse. Threx had long known the harsh realities of the universe. The strong survived, and the weak perished. The Deathworlders had shattered that belief in a single act of mercy. Now Threx had to rebuild his shattered empire and figure out what the future held. He had promised his people strength, and he would deliver, but he also had a debt to the Deathworlders. What if they truly are as honorable as they claim? Threx mused. He didn't believe in charity or weakness, but perhaps the Deathworlders were different. Perhaps their strength was not only in their ability to fight, but in their ability to forgive and build. Could there be something greater at play? An unspoken understanding that could change everything. A voice broke his thoughts. "Commander, we've detected an anomaly." One of his officers looked up, their face full of concern. Threx's heart skipped a beat. "What kind of anomaly?" "It's coming from the Deathworlder fleet, sir. We've detected new, unusual signals emanating from their ships." The room fell silent. The aliens' own survival might depend on understanding what this new development was. But could it be a trap, a trick to lure them into false security? Threx stood up and walked toward the officer. "Continue monitoring and report immediately. We will not be caught off guard." Back aboard the Deathworlder flagship, Commander Drake continued to stare at the message from the aliens. The galaxy might be watching, but Drake knew that whatever came next was beyond anyone's control. He had given the aliens a chance to rebuild, but what would they do with it? Could the Deathworlders truly trust their promise to seek strength without seeking vengeance? And if their intentions were a lie, would the Deathworlders be ready for the consequences? The story wasn't over. Not by a long shot. In the quiet of the command center, Commander Drake sat in his chair, the weight of the galaxy pressing heavily on his shoulders. He had made the decision to show mercy, but as time passed, doubts began to creep in. Was it the right call? The alien ambassador's words echoed in his mind, their promise of strength haunting him. Could the Deathworlders trust them? Or was it all part of a larger, more dangerous game? The Deathworlder fleet had been prepared for war, and they would remain vigilant. The galaxy's future might be uncertain, but Drake had a responsibility to ensure the survival of his people. Even if mercy had been shown, that didn't mean they could afford to lower their guard. "Commander," the communications officer interrupted his thoughts. "We've intercepted something strange." Drake stood up, his heart quickening. "What is it?" The officer glanced at the screen. It flickered momentarily before stabilizing, revealing a string of encrypted signals. It was from the aliens, the same species they had just spared. Drake's pulse quickened. Had they turned? Was this a sign of betrayal? The transmission wasn't threatening, but the timing was unsettling. This was a signal of some kind, but what did it mean? "Patch it through," Drake ordered. The officer complied, and soon a hologram of the alien ambassador appeared on the screen. But this time, their expression was different, tensed, as if they were carrying something heavy. Their usual composed demeanor was gone. "Commander Drake, we come with news." The ambassador's voice was grave. "The galaxy is changing. What we shared with you before, the hope of peace, was real. But what we couldn't tell you then was the full extent of the forces we are up against. A darker, more dangerous power is stirring in the far reaches of the galaxy." Drake's eyes narrowed. This was unexpected. What could they mean by a darker power? Were they warning him, or was this another tactic to gain favor, to manipulate him into letting down his guard? The ambassador continued, "A force beyond even our comprehension is rising. It was the real reason we were defeated. It's an enemy we cannot face alone. And now we seek your help again." Drake's instincts flared. This was no longer just about mercy or alliances. The situation had escalated. The stakes were much higher than he had anticipated. "What are you talking about?" Drake demanded. "Who is this enemy?" The alien ambassador hesitated before responding. "They are ancient, powerful, and they seek the total annihilation of all who stand in their way. We have felt their presence for years, but now they are making their move. We know little of their true nature, but they are called the Voidborn, beings of unimaginable power and malice." Drake's mind raced. Voidborn. He had never heard of them. But the name alone sent a chill down his spine. This wasn't just about the alien struggle anymore. This was a galactic threat. "What do you want from us?" Drake asked, his voice firm. The alien ambassador's next words would determine the future of the galaxy itself. "We need your fleet," the ambassador said, almost pleading. "You are the only ones who can stand against them. Your warriors, your technology. Together, we can survive. If we do nothing, we will be wiped out, and the Voidborn will consume everything in their path." Drake's mind was racing, torn between his duty and his growing suspicion. Was this another trick, or were the aliens telling the truth? The Voidborn sounded like a threat unlike anything he had ever faced. The room fell silent as Commander Drake processed the gravity of the situation. The choice was not simple. The galaxy had already been pushed to the brink, and now it seemed like another war was on the horizon. But this time, it wasn't just the fate of one species that was at stake. It was the entire galaxy. Drake took a deep breath. He wasn't sure if he could trust the alien ambassador, but if what they said was true, the Voidborn would not stop until every living being in their path was destroyed. And if that happened, There would be no more enemies to fight, no more allies to betray. "Prepare the fleet," Drake said quietly, making the most difficult decision of his life. "We'll face this together. But understand this. If this is a trick, I will not hesitate to end it. Do not waste our time." The ambassador's face lit up with a mixture of relief and hope. "Thank you, Commander Drake. We knew you were the one who could help us." As the hologram faded, the command center went silent. The Deathworlders had a new mission. They weren't just fighting for their own survival anymore. They were fighting to protect the entire galaxy from an enemy that no one had prepared for. The Voidborn were coming, and the Deathworlders had no choice but to rise to the challenge.